Joining us right now, the new, I don't know what the title is. I get confused. There's general manager, president of basketball operations, head of basketball operations, which I'm kind of, I like that one because then you could say hobo, head of basketball operations. Whatever his title is, he's the guy in charge of our Sacramento Kings, Monte McNair. Monte, my name's Dave. Welcome to Sacramento. How are you?
Dave, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
What is the title, like officially? Is it, I don't know, GM, president of basketball ops?
General manager. Yep.
General manager. Have you noticed that? Like some teams will have a, some teams will have a GM and an assistant GM, but then the GM answers to the president of basketball ops. And have you noticed every team has their own different like nomenclature for what they call their execs?
Yeah, it can get very confusing. Each team does it their own way, and it's kind of changed over time. I think baseball started that a little bit. So yeah, sometimes the general manager is like you said, the head of basketball operations. Sometimes there's a president or somebody like that above them, but yeah, here I'm the general manager.
Well, I watched your press conference. I heard you on with my colleagues Jason and Doug, and that was fantastic. I don't know if they prepped you. I'm the hard hitting guy, so let's get right to the hard hitting. Super hard-hitting questions. Does it make you feel good? I don't know if this is a record, but I think Oak Park High, the only high school with two general managers, you and Alicia Valvanis from the Seattle Storm. Is that for you maybe the biggest accomplishment out of this whole thing?
Absolutely. No, I read an article about that, and I don't know Alicia personally, but that's incredible, and I'm going to have to reach out to her and get some advice for sure.
Making Oak Park High happy. And when I first read it, it said you were an Oak Park grad, and we have an Oak Park here, and I had to put two and two together to figure out you were a SoCal guy. And then we go on to Princeton. I want to take you back real quick, and I don't know if this is a source of emotion for you negatively, but I want to take you back to October 23rd of 2004. I assume it was a nice fall day at Harvard, and Monte McNair catches a 31-yard pass for a touchdown, but the loss, 39-14. So I got to ask you, more happy about the touchdown catch or more sad about the loss when you look back?
Wow, you've done your research because there's not a lot of catches to find there. I had 4 in my entire career, so props to you for finding one of them. But I will say, at the time, I think we were still in the game, maybe even took the lead. Mm-hmm. This was a Ryan Fitzpatrick-led Harvard team, so they were extremely good and ended up pulling away from us. While I was excited that I got the touchdown, I will say probably more disappointed that we ended up losing.
Well, and that's the thing. In that 2004 year, you had 4 catches in 4 different games, anywhere from 15 to 40 yards. You had the touchdown, but you caught the ball almost every time you were targeted. In retrospect, should the Princeton coaching staff be under fire for not targeting you more and understanding the weapon they had in Monte McNair?
You said it, not me, but I think the stats speak for themselves. As an analytics guy, if your guy's catching every pass thrown his way, you should throw it to him more. But no, in all honesty, unfortunately, it was my own collarbone. I broke it twice, and that really put a damper on my career.
Well, that's a perfect transition because you mentioned your love of analytics, and I want to get a little bit into that. I use the term nerd as a not as a pejorative. I think it's a compliment. Nerds run the world, and our ownership is made up of many, many nerds. And by nerds, I mean people that have been super successful in the tech business, that understand numbers, that understand analytics. And one thing that really excited me about you is that you're multilingual. You speak nerd, but you also speak jock. You have a foot in both from your football background, but also your computer science background. Have you found that has served you well, being able to speak to both crowds and maybe in some cases translate to both crowds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a huge key being around, a locker room, a football locker room. I played basketball through high school as well. I think that's huge you learn all the dynamics that are at play and how to talk to people a certain way. And then being in an analytics department for the last 13 years, you learn how to speak that language. And then I put it all together the last 5 or 6 years when I traveled with the team and worked closely with our coaching staff. And I hope I was successful in trying to bridge that gap and be a liaison of sorts. Yeah, I think one quick story, like you said, I played football at Princeton, and one of my teammates one time, he called me a sports nerd, and I said, "We're all sports nerds, right?" And he said, "No, you're the ultimate sports nerd." So I took that as a compliment to be at Princeton playing a sport, and even the other Princeton football players thought I was a bigger sports nerd than them. So I take it as a compliment, and I'm excited to live in both worlds.
Monte McNair joining us, new GM of the Kings. Now, the Kings in the interview process, I'm sure, laid out what they expect of you. That's completely normal. But you were set in Houston and working for Daryl Morey and with a very successful franchise. Listen, what happens behind closed doors, I understand it. But did you have expectations too coming in? And were those expectations for you answered, obviously, enough to make you uproot and move out here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the outside looking in, the key thing was the talent on the roster. That was intriguing. But getting in on the interview process, and like you said, the ownership group, Vivek, especially, we speak the same language in a lot of ways, and I think that was really apparent during the interview process. That made me even more excited. And now getting in here these last few days and speaking with Luke and others in the organization, I think we always talked about in Houston alignment from the top down, starting with ownership, the general manager, the head coach, and everybody else in the organization. And that was key to, I think, our success there. And I hope we have the same thing here, and I think we will.
Well, speaking of Luke, and his name was brought up at the presser, and full disclosure, I love Luke Walton. I think he's a super cool dude. And the fact that you both are Southern California guys probably bodes well for you getting along, just that chill environment. Most people I know from down there have. Luke certainly. As you said, he'd be the coach next year, and I'm certainly not challenging that at all. But I am curious as to the process. Was that have you been able to do an evaluation and come to that conclusion? Is it, I'm not ready to rock the boat, I need to see what's going on? I am curious as to what led you to be able to make kind of a rock hard decision there, at your opening press conference.
Yeah, no, I think it was a big part. We talked about it during the interview process, and we've talked about it after. But to me, I think it was clear from looking at the team and certainly speaking with Luke that he's a great coach, and our alignment is spot on. And I'm really excited. I think he's a younger guy. I think he relates well to the players, and our vision for what the team's going to be is in lockstep. And so to me, it ends up being an easy decision to keep Luke on board.
New GM Monte McNair joining us. I'm a huge fan of Sam Hinkie and Daryl Morey, and got to bond with Daryl when Ron Artest was traded from Sacramento to Houston. I love their mindset, the thought process. I know you could probably spend 3 hours doing this, but could you maybe speak on some of the things you learned there and what you really have brought to the table from the people that have influenced you over there?
Yeah, we've had been really fortunate to have a lot of success, a lot of stability at the Rockets. I was there for 13 years under Daryl Morey. We've had guys like Sam Hinkie and now Gerson Rosas, Arturas Karnisovas, the new Bulls GM was with us. So we've had a lot of success, and people go on. And I think, I'm going to take a lot of that here, kind of the core principles. We're definitely going to be aggressive. I think that's a key word that keeps coming up, not just on the court, but in how we go to build this team. And I think in Houston, we showed that year in and year out when, we were not just waiting for opportunities, but cultivating them and then being ready to pounce on them when the time came. And, I think that's a key thing that I'm going to bring here as we continue to improve the team.
Last thing we're going to do with the GM in his opening, the first day he's dealing with media is get specific on the future. In fact, I don't know if that'll ever happen, and I like that. I like GMs that hold their cards close to their vest. That's part of the job. But I do, because of the influence, I want to ask you, I think Sam Hinkie was very much misunderstood in Philadelphia. I think the process was misunderstood. You go back to Philly, and he's almost a god over there. And you're looking at I don't want to say a blank slate. You have talent here, but you're looking at a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 14 years. Are you retaining every arrow in your quiver? And what I'm getting at is, Nothing's exact, Monty, but when you look at a process type rebuild where it is aggressively acquiring assets for the future, sometimes at the expense of the here and now, is that to use the analogy and extend it, is that an arrow you will continue to retain, or do you have a very specific method as to how to go from A to B?
Yeah, I think you can't have too specific of a method because you don't know what the future is going to look like, and so you have to maintain that flexibility. Sam, I think, went into Philadelphia and decided that was the best course of action for them. I think what I see here is a lot of talent on the roster, and like you said, I don't think it's a complete blank slate. So for me, it's more of building around it, continuing to improve. And what we want to be is not just a one-time playoff team, but a sustained playoff team. And eventually we want to compete for championships. And so, we're going to use those quivers when the time comes, and we'll be aggressive in it. But I think there's plenty of talent, versatility on this roster that we can already build around.
My next question, and you pretty much asked and answered, playoffs ASAP because of the drought, or build a slow and steady contender over time. I love that you already answered that, and one thing that tells me is that you feel secure in the fact that you do have, listen, time's of the essence, but you don't have to make the playoffs next year. We'd love it, but it sounds to me like for you, slow, steady burn and a perennial contender far more important than a manufactured one or maybe two and done playoff appearance.
Yeah, and I would say it's more that we're not putting a timeline on whenever that happens. We'll be ready, and it could happen this year, and it could happen in the future. But whenever it does happen, we need to be ready with all the tools in the tool belt, like you said, all the arrows in the quiver, so that we can go get those big moves done. And and when that time comes, then we'll be able to, like you said, be in the playoffs for a sustained period of time. That's how you eventually build towards a championship, not just a one and done. So I think that's exactly right.
Monte McNair with us. Monty, your philosophy, what kind of input should a general manager have, if any, in regards to play style and pace? And piggybacking on that, do you mold the preferred style around the roster? Do you try to mold the roster around the style, or combo it up while you're building?
Yeah, I think it's a partnership. Both ways, both building the roster and the product that we put on the floor. Myself and Luke, we need to be a partnership, and so far I think we're very aligned on that. And so, I think as far as what we're going to do on the floor, we'll continue to talk as to ways that we can improve the team. But I think the core principles, I've talked about in my press conference, we want to be aggressive. We want to play fast. We want to space the floor. Those are things you have to do regardless of your personnel in today's NBA. But the rest of it is going to be personnel dependent. And in Houston, we went to the extreme with small ball, but here we have a lot of talent and versatility on the roster. And so we're going to build things a little differently in that regard. So it's a little mixture of both.
But before we continue and begin to wrap up, I want to make sure I don't forget this. You mentioned some of the talent you worked with over in Houston, and in the process of you getting this job, I'm sure you were at least slightly aware of other names being rolled in as possible candidates. Sachin Gupta is one of those. I don't know how you would know this, but I wanted to share with you that Sachin Gupta was I was very vocal about him amongst others in the history and all that, as we as fans try to latch on to things we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to GM candidates. I got a phone call from him the day after you were hired. I'd never spoken to him in my life, and he called and he said, I wanted to thank you for the kind words and support. And then he spent the next 15 minutes talking to me about you and how wonderful it was to work with you and how lucky we were to have you here and to make sure that everyone gave you their full support and got behind you because we won the lottery with you. I wanted to make sure you knew that. That's a class act and obviously a testament to the bond you guys had all in Houston.
No, Sachin is a 100% class act. We worked together for a long time in Houston. I consider him a mentor. He was there when I initially came on. We've continued our great friendship. He introduced me through a mutual friend to my wife, so I'm forever indebted to him for that as well. And I think you were exactly right. I mean, Sachin also would have been a home run hire, and he's going to get his chance to run an NBA team someday, and that team's going to be very lucky. I appreciate his kind words, and he is not just a great friend, but an absolute stud and star in the making in the NBA.
We talked about nerd versus jock in that language, and I think a lot of people maybe are already thinking, okay, analytics guy is going to be rolling around like Scrooge McDuck. In fact, I said that earlier, that you be rolling around like Scrooge McDuck in receipts and paperwork and numbers and all that, and just going analytic crazy. But in all seriousness, what is your philosophy when it comes to analytics and how that word is obviously misused sometimes, and the old school eye test sort of jock mentality where if a guy has that? How do you blend those?
Yeah, number one, we just want as much information as we can get, and that's how you make the best decisions. So number one is acquiring that information, whether that's analytics, whether that's your scouting, coaching staff, whether that's your training staff, biometric data. There's so much stuff out there. So first is gathering that, and then you just feel so much more comfortable when all the things line up behind a decision. If the analytics say one thing, our scouts and coaches are saying another thing, you start digging and figure out why the discrepancy, because something's off there. And ultimately what usually happens is, you come towards the middle and you find a common ground, and you feel much better about your decision. So, and I think being around the team day in and day out, as opposed to earlier in my career when I was sitting a little further back, that really helped give the perspective of all the stuff that's going on around the team and all the other considerations that you have to give to decisions. And so obviously while I cut my teeth on the analytics side, I think these last few years seeing that up front day to day has been huge. And there's, it has to be a marriage between the two.
Monte McNair, as we begin to wrap up with him, and to that point, the scouting department, is it as robust as you like? Will it look? How will the scouting department, if at all, look different in a year? Assuming you have carte blanche, you can do what you want.
Yeah, I'm still actually getting in and getting to know everybody, but from what I've seen, a very thorough group, diverse group, which is what I like. There's you want people, former players, former coaches, non-players, people from the outside. And so I think we have that. And, I've just been reading some of the reports and getting the download on, especially the draft and what they've been looking at. And I've been very excited to see that. I think it's continuing to add diversity and people with strong opinions, that are not afraid to say it, but also willing to listen and change their opinion when new information comes to light. So I think we'll see what happens, but so far I've been very happy with what I've seen, and still getting to know all the scouts and everybody in the building.
All right, let's finish up with some quick stuff here, and I think you addressed this at some point, either at the presser or maybe on the on KHDK with Jason and Doug. You've been made aware that De'Aaron Fox thinks In-N-Out is trash and is a Whataburger guy. You have experience with both In-N-Out and Whataburger, and correctly say that In-N-Out is superior. Does that mean you have to trade him immediately, or can you guys work this out internally so that we can somehow get past all of this controversy?
No, it's I've been a big In-N-Out guy growing up in California. It's hard not to be. I know there's a huge Whataburger following in Texas, so I get the rivalry. I'm going to forgive De'Aaron on this one, and we're going to work it out. Okay. I think we'll be fine.
Dude, it's the spicy ketchup. That's all Whataburger has. Am I missing something? That's it.
I will give Whataburger credit. Uh-huh. It's their honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich that's the real gem on the menu, not the burger.
Oh. Yeah, but they don't call it what a honey chicken whatever sandwich. They call it Whataburger. That's what. That's
a little bit of a tongue twister. So I think Whataburger rolls off the tongue better.
Monty, you did go to Princeton, so that means you're smart, or somebody on the faculty there. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
That's the correct answer. Is chili a stew?
No.
How would you classify chili? Is it a soup? Is it its own category? If it's not a stew, go Go ahead.
I think chili is its own category.
Okay. Is a taco a sandwich?
No.
Hot dog's a sandwich. Taco is not. Interesting. Is it because of the tortilla as opposed to the bread?
I think so. Yeah, I think a sandwich has to be more of a bread thing. Okay. I think that's the key.
Okay. All right.
This was Princeton. This was Princeton 101. This was my first class. It was Is This a Sandwich 101? That was my first semester. So
I would imagine.
I'm going back to my old days.
I imagine there was a thesis. There was a peer reviewed something or another. And anything at Princeton? Were you in any of the did you have time to be in any of the clubs or do any of the things, or were you school and football and that's about all you had time for?
Yeah, no, it's definitely school and football takes up a lot of time. But I did join one of the famed eating clubs there, which is kind of the key component of social life there for upperclassmen. But definitely football and school took up more of the time for me.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. Did you say eating clubs?
Yes.
Wait, what is that?
Yes, that's what. It's basically a little bit like a co-ed fraternity sorority thing. But yeah, that's where you eat your meals. But it's also kind of the social life on campus.
Okay, I'm thinking you guys have like grills out there and are barbecuing and sharing recipes and stuff. It's a social thing. Okay, I got you.
A little bit of that.
As I accidentally tried to FaceTime you, apologize for that. All right, so as we wrap up, I want to say one more thing to you. I think you're aware of this. You were in Houston. You weren't in a bubble. You've gone out and breathed air and watched NBA games. I'm sure you're aware of this, Monty. But this is a special job you have. This is a very special town, and you now hold some of the keys. We have not made the playoffs in 14 years. I am a fan of this team. I am in no way a journalist. I just happen to have a mic in front of me. We are psychotic in a great way. We are fanatical, and we have been underserved for so very long and suffered disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, going back a long, long way. I imagine you're aware of how rabid this fan base, and I imagine, and I'm totally leading you now, but I imagine you do not take that responsibility lightly, nor the prospect of being part of one of the Pied Pipers that can lead us to the promised land.
No, I grew up watching some of the great Sacramento teams of the late 90s and early 2000s, and I saw the fan base then, and it's been made abundantly clear since I took this job both how passionate but also frustrated the fan base is, and I understand it. And I think my job, I was fortunate enough for my years in Houston to have some great examples of what it takes to get back there. But I 100% do not take it lightly, and I'm really excited to get going and get working to get these fans what they deserve, which is not just a playoff team. Although I know they would be happy when that happens, but like I said, a sustained playoff team and ultimately a championship contender. That's the ultimate goal for us.
He got up early. He did a press conference. He did radio shows. That's over 20 minutes of Monte McNair giving us his time to visit with all of you. It was a pleasure to at least virtually meet you as we talk along the way. Please know, Monty, we are here as your resource for restaurant options, recommendations around town, anything you might need. We are all an extended family. Welcome to Sacramento, and we certainly appreciate your time, and we're behind you 100%.
Dave, I really appreciate it, and I'm very excited to get started. Thank you.
It's the Carmichael Dave Show on Sports 1140 KHTK.